Happy Wednesday, folks, and welcome to episode 425 of AskGSM here today for Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great week so far. We had my interview with Bron Breakker finally go up this morning. It actually went up at midnight, I believe. I scheduled it for midnight instead of 8 a.m., which is when the article went up on Bleacher Report. My bad. But you can check it out right now in audio form. Our first interview back in December was in video form. This one was over the phone, but he was great, so check that out when you get a chance. And then coming next week, my interview for the first time ever with the Celtic Warrior SmackDown superstar, WWE's own Sheamus, ahead of the Royal Rumble. Spoke yesterday over video. He was amazing. That's going to be going up, I believe, at some point next week ahead of the Royal Rumble that weekend. Here on the channel in an article form over on dailyddt.com. So keep an eye out for that as well. If you want to send in a question to this very show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the hashtag AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/gram.gsm.matthews. Drop a question on the post that I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video, and I'll include your question in next week's edition. So let's get right into it here. Joe M. from YouTube, their first question was, you hear a lot of talk about guys from WWE who would be better off in AEW, but not much for guys who would be better off in WWE, and for good reason. But do you think Brian Pillman Jr. would be a good example of someone who might actually do better in WWE, particularly NXT 2.0? I think he's got a lot to look. I think he's got a lot to like from a look, wrestling, and talking perspective, but AEW doesn't seem to have as much more than a jobber to the stars, or doesn't seem to see him as much more than a jobber to the stars. And plus, we've seen what having the pedigree has done for a guy like Bron Breakker. To address the first part of your question real quick, you are right. I think there are people in AEW who ideally could do well in WWE. I mean, there's pretty much almost anyone on that roster you can make a star in WWE with the right booking. I mean, again, I always go back to this, but they put the fucking WWE Championship on Jinder Mahal. If you can make a main event star out of him, albeit for 6 months, you can make a main event star out of pretty much anyone. Maybe not Luther, for example, but there's a lot of people in AEW. If WWE had the right creative direction, the right people in charge with the right vision, pretty much anyone in AEW could be a star in WWE. That being said, I mean, again, I've said before, a guy like a Lance Archer or a Brian Cage, they're bigger guys. WWE has historically been the land of the giants. I think they would tend to do better in a WWE if it wasn't in this creative rut that it's in right now. If this was NXT of like 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, they probably would have thrived had WWE brought them in at that point. But at any rate, I'm talking about Brian Pillman Jr. specifically. I'm a Brian Pillman Jr. fan. I actually got to know him a little bit, not on a personal level, but like got familiar with his work around 2 years ago. I think I saw my first match of his first match, not his first match, but like the first time I had seen him in action was actually at an indie show, a Northeast Wrestling show in January of 2020. A show called Over the Top. We're actually going this weekend as well. And I think he faced Flip Gordon, if I'm not mistaken. He might have been in the Knights Battle Royal as well. It wasn't him and Griff Garrison. They weren't doing the Varsity Blondes thing. That wasn't until they went to AEW. He was on his own. I actually had a chance. I didn't meet him. I wanted to meet him that day. I missed my opportunity. Funny story, I actually went to go meet Brian Cage at StarCast back in 2019 in Chicago over All Out Weekend. And I bought a ticket to meet Brian Cage. The person I bought the ticket from thought I said Brian Pillman. So I almost paid to meet Brian Pillman by accident. I had a change, didn't meet Brian Pillman. Had no idea who he was at that point, aside from being the son of, obviously, Brian Pillman. But Brian Cage was great. But yeah, with Pillman, I think he is a guy that could do well in WWE. I wouldn't write him off just yet as far as AEW is concerned. I feel like he has a good thing going with Griff Garrison. I know they're the jobber to the stars right now, but they haven't featured quite a bit over the last year. I would say they've gone over to a small extent. They got a good act going with him, Griff, Julia Hart, assuming they don't break her off and put her in with the House of Black and with Malachi and Brody King and whatever, with the whole fucking goofy eye patch thing that they got going on right now. But I think they can do even better as a tag team than they are right now. And when it gets to the point, I mean, both guys are signed. I think Julia Hart is signed as well. Both guys are signed. There's no reason to not push them. But, I mean, again, there's actually a couple of reasons. There's a lot of top tag teams right now in AEW. It's not their time. I think if they stick around long enough and AEW continues to feature them consistently, whether it be in a feud with the House of Black or a feud like Bryan had with MJF a couple of months ago, which ultimately went nowhere because it seemed to showcase Bryan as more of a singles guy, but we really haven't seen anything of him on his own since then. That being said, though, I think they have potential as a tag team. Beyond that, can Brian Pillman be an AEW World Champion? Probably not with the roster that AEW has and how they book things, only having one top championship, not having a developmental system really. I don't think so. He's not there yet by any means. He still needs to improve in a lot of ways, but he's got the raw skills. Comparing him to Braun Breaker, I know Braun Breaker is already NXT champion. Braun Breaker doesn't have the same experience that Brian Pillman does. Obviously, both are from wrestling families. Brian Pillman's been wrestling for a few years longer than Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker, though, is already, I would say, more of a complete package. Brian Pillman might be better in the ring, but I would say that's also debatable, but I would say Braun Breaker is a bigger and better complete package right now than Brian Pillman Jr. is. Braun Breaker is ready for the main roster tomorrow, assuming they actually book him correctly, but he's got the look, he's got the mic skills, he can go in the ring, he's got that it factor. Brian Pillman Jr. so far, on his own, doesn't have that same it factor, but he is good enough and has that equity with the Brian Pillman Jr. name that I think, can go far with the right push. And again, I hear about like the upcoming Owen Hart tournament and think to myself, that is a prime place for him to shine. I don't know if he would win the whole thing. Would they just give him the cup just because of his family name? Maybe. I mean, would it make sense? Yeah. Is he ready for that sort of thing? The thing is, if he were to win the Owen Hart Cup, they would have to push him from that point forward. Would they do that? I don't know. That's the question. I don't think so, because that's only a couple of months away. They have shown no signs of pushing him on his own anytime soon. And there's already a lot of people they're not currently featuring on their own or in tag teams or whatever. So, yeah, with Brian Pillman, I think AEW is the right fit for him personally. NXT, there's a very good chance he can get lost in the shuffle. Just because he has the last name of Pillman doesn't exactly mean a lot. Braun Breaker isn't... I mean, they might change his name, to be honest. I mean, I don't know. Braun had told me twice that he was the one who pushed to use the Breaker name and not Steiner. I find that hard to believe. I think Rex Steiner was a much cooler name. I think they told him to change it, and that was the name that he came up with. Maybe he did want to change it from Rex Steiner to Braun Breaker, because he thought Braun Breaker was a better name and he didn't want to use the last name of Steiner. I don't believe that, because it's not like they're calling him a Steiner kid on TV. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like they're saying that he's the son of Rick Steiner, but that he's just not using the last name. Like, they're not even doing that. Like, Charlotte back in the day wasn't using the Flair name, but we knew she was Flair's daughter because they had Ric Flair show up, and Ric Flair is obviously much more prominent than Rick Steiner, but they still acknowledged her as Ric Flair's daughter. And people know the Steiners. I mean, not as much as Ric Flair, but they're still notable names in wrestling. Again, she wasn't using the last name of Flair on TV at that point, but we knew she was a Flair. We know Braun Breaker is a Steiner, but they're not even referencing the fact that he is a second-generation star or the fact he's a Steiner. And they had his dad come out to celebrate him with the championship, and we talked about this in our interview. But they didn't acknowledge it on TV. They didn't show it on TV. It came out, it happened after the show went off the air. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. Brian Pillman's got potential. I like Brian Pillman. I think he can go further, like to a TNT title level in AEW at some point. Maybe not world champion. WWE might have more of an opportunity there to grow, just because they have different brands, and in NXT they need more stars and more up-and-comers like that. Would they even want to recruit him if they're not going after indie talent, notably? I mean, reportedly, they say that, but then they're recruiting the Ring of Honor Women's World Champion Roxy. So I honestly don't know what to believe. But yeah, I would keep an eye out for Pillman. I think he'll get his just due in AEW in time. And maybe I'm wrong, he won't, and they'll fire him or he'll leave. But I think he probably has the best chance for success in AEW, because so far they've shown that they're high on him and Griff. They just haven't gone all the way with them, and I don't think they need to right now because they're not quite at that level. Joe's second question: what was the point of AJ Styles in the Grayson-Waller feud? It seems it did more harm than good, as Waller was made to look like a coward at every point, and then lost anyway when it mattered, hurting the heat he gained from attacking Johnny Gargano. Well, I'll tell you a couple things, what the purposes that it served. One, it got Grayson Waller on Raw. I'm sure there's a lot of people, a majority of people who watch Raw, do not watch NXT. They don't give a fuck about NXT. They don't know who Braun Breaker is or Grayson Waller or Carmelo Hayes. But they got their first look at Grayson Waller with him appearing on Raw not once but twice. He interrupted one of his promos and then he cost AJ a match, AJ won by DQ, but he attacked AJ during a match with Austin Theory last week on Raw. So, for example, if Grayson Waller won the Royal Rumble or they were to call him up by the end of the year, more people will know who he is via the appearances he made on Raw very briefly than a Braun Breaker. I mean, they obviously might be more captivated by a Braun Breaker at first sight, but Grayson Waller already has that familiarity with the fans because he's been on Raw a few times. It helped with that. It helped give NXT, it didn't really give them a major boost in the ratings, but that was another intent, was to get more eyes on NXT and putting a notable main roster star on the show. I don't know whatever happened to Riddle and MSK. They did that one tag team match a few weeks ago. I don't think we've heard from Riddle on NXT since then, so I don't know if that's over or not. But they're putting more main roster people on NXT to get eyes on the show. It is sad. I could see why they're doing it, and I get it, but they shouldn't have to do that. And the funny thing about it is that the whole reason of the NXT revamp was to get rid of the indie people and to not focus on those sort of people anymore. And they just kind of blew that whole thing up, and now they're focusing on the main roster stars because NXT needs more stars. They have a lot of stars in the making. They don't have any established stars with people like Gargano and Ciampa maybe even moving up, Gargano leaving, and all the other releases and people like that. So I don't think it was completely pointless. Waller should not have beaten AJ Styles. It's AJ Styles. AJ needs to be not rebooted, but rebuilt back up. The guy lost to Omos in 3 minutes on Raw a few weeks ago. I don't know if that feud is over or not, but Styles needs to be made to feel more important again. This is probably the least relevant AJ Styles has ever been in the 6 years he's been with WWE. He feels like a lower mid-carder right now. He wasn't even on Raw this week. So Waller should not have beaten AJ, but it showed, and that match was very good last week between AJ and Grayson, I thought, on NXT. It showed that Waller could hold his own in defeat, and it's not like he's doing this all the time where he's made to look great in defeat, but he loses. No, I don't think he beat LA Knight, but he beat, he won the War Games match. He beat Dexter Lumis this week. He beat Odyssey Jones a few weeks ago. It's not like he's losing consistently. He lost to AJ Styles. If he loses to LA Knight again, I might be like, okay, I don't know if that was the right call. But they had him beat Dexter this week. He's got a heater now. I don't really think it hurt his heat all that much from attacking Gargano last month. It's not like they now have nothing for Waller. The guy ended Gargano's NXT run. He took AJ Styles to the limit in a very good match. He's resuming his rivalry with LA Knight. And he just beat Dexter Lumis on Tuesday. So I wouldn't say Waller's exactly in a bad spot. And I think that AJ feud didn't, cause his stock to skyrocket, but it did get more eyes on Waller, and it followed up on the Gargano feud very nicely. It came completely out of nowhere, did the Styles and Waller feud, but they followed it up. They followed up the Gargano attack with that feud, again, getting more eyes on Waller. Because when Waller attacked Gargano, even though Waller had just main evented War Games, I saw people on my timeline like, why would Gargano get attacked by nobody? Who the fuck is Grayson Waller? They may still not like the guy, which I understand, but at least they know who he is. In the AJ feud, people can know, oh, is that the guy that hung with AJ Styles? Yes, it is. So I don't think he needed to beat AJ. Is he being made to look like a coward? Yeah, but he's a pest heel, I think. I don't think he needs to be this dominant asshole. He is an asshole, but I don't think he needs to be made to look dominant, and he was made to look credible in the matches he's had so far. He's won more often than not. I think his booking is just fine. He's like this, confident, cocky prick, social media savvy asshole, like I said, where being a coward makes sense, being a pest heel makes sense. He's got a heater as of last night's NXT, and the former member of Indushir. I'm totally fine with the Grayson Waller booking right now, and I think the AJ Styles feud did him some good personally. Noel from Facebook, thoughts on the Moon Knight trailer? Yeah, that dropped on Monday during a football game. I liked it a lot. I got a first look at it on Monday night or Tuesday morning or whatever, with someone doing commentary over it. I'm a big fan of the new Rockstars YouTube channel, and I watch all their stuff and their reactions to trailers and Eric Voss's breakdowns of the trailers. And then I watched the whole thing in its entirety with the music and all late last night, and it looks awesome. The trailer looks great. So I have no idea what the Moon Knight character is exactly about outside of what I've heard from people like New Rockstars and That Chris Mueller and I have talked about here on the channel a few times. Beyond that, though, I really don't know a lot about Moon Knight. And I'm curious to see what's in store for that character and what he brings to the table. The vibe that I got from the trailer is that it's going to be unlike anything else we have seen from the Disney Plus shows up to this point. And the cool thing about this show is that of all the shows we've gotten so far, and we've had some great shows from Disney Plus in 2021, they were all established characters. They were just kind of a deeper look into those characters. Wanda, Vision, Loki, Hawkeye, Falcon and Winter Soldier, even What If was based off established characters. This is the first Disney Plus Marvel show that is going to be taking a look at a new character that we were not at all familiar with if you only watch the movies and shows and don't read the comics. And I like Oscar Isaac, the guy playing Moon Knight, is a very good actor. And I don't know, I really like the trailer a lot. Maybe it bombs and it's completely boring or stupid or whatever, but so far I'm hooked. And I'm looking forward to seeing it and watching it and reviewing it with Chris, hopefully, when it drops in late March. No second question. Thoughts on... Oh, that was another question, by the way, from Supersonic X 1991. Got to give him a shout out. They only sent in one question this week, but they asked for my thoughts on the Moon Knight trailer. And he also asked, too, will he play a major part of the MCU? Major, I don't think so. It could open the doors to more, again, creepy... I don't want to say horror vibe, but horror-esque characters like... Excuse me. If that makes sense, where it's like more supernatural type shit, like what we're going to be getting in the Multiverse of Madness, it might open the door to more of that type of stuff. Will he be one of the faces of the Avengers? I don't think so. But maybe the character is so great that he will be. I don't know, but time will tell. So anyway, he asked that question as well. Noel's second question, thoughts on WWE calling out AEW on the women's street fight bloodbath? It was just dumb. I don't know if they called them out. It was more so, I think it was Variety or some sort of news publication did an article on WWE versus AEW. They interviewed a bunch of people from both companies. A WWE source that I think went unnamed had referenced the women's street fight, saying that what they do is not what we do. We haven't done that in 20 years, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, it was weird because it's not like WWE just put out a statement talking about it. That would be stupid. I mean, they were asked about, not specifically that match, but their thoughts on AEW. Why they would pull apart that one out of the many matches that AEW has done where it's a bloodbath. I mean, I'm not advocating for more bloodbaths in wrestling. I think if done once in a while, I'm a fan of it. The bloodbath and the street fight, I wasn't a big fan of because the feud wasn't that good. It was a great street fight women's tag team match, but the feud was completely, I don't want to say non-existent, but it was so fucking basic. It was like the Andrade and Cody Rhodes match. The Atlanta street fight. Again, the feud wasn't really that good. They hadn't been feuding for that long, but they had this massive blow-off street fight like they'd been feuding for 6 months, and Cody went through a fucking flaming table. I don't like that shit personally, especially when it doesn't make sense to do shit like that. But I think what's telling is that AEW, or WWE rather, in that statement, had pointed at the women's street fight tag team match. AEW does hardcore street fight type shit every fucking week. But they specifically called out that one, very likely because it's just women bleeding. And they don't like that. I don't like it either, but, I mean, they do the same thing with the men, so why didn't they call out... I mean, honestly, if you want to say a statement like that, then why not call out AEW for also doing the dumb spot? I mean, which honestly was even worse. The Cody Andrade flaming table spot was far worse than anything that Ty Conti, the Bunny, Penelope Ford, and Anna Jay did in that women's tag team match. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the outlaw type shit, as Jim Cornette would say, I guess, but, you know, you got to call a spade here. If you're going to call them out on that, you got to call them out on, some of the other shit they do, like with the flaming table, which was incredibly dumb. Some of the hardcore stuff is great. Like, for example, I loved, and I thought it was the best women's match all year from that company, I loved the Brett Baker, Thunder Rosa, unsanctioned street fight, lights out match, or whatever the fuck. Because it was a great feud, two top stars, main event to Dynamite. It made sense, and Britt Baker bled in that match, and I didn't have an issue with it because it was so well done. But WWE didn't say anything about that at the time, or they didn't put out a statement about it, or weren't asked about it. So I don't know, I just think, I'm not a fan of it, they don't have to be a fan of it either, but to call them like, what was it, self-inflicted mutilation or whatever, I think the statement had said, it was just fucking stupid. I mean, WWE does a lot of dumb things. They do a lot of dumb things as well. Maybe not from that standpoint. I feel like they do from time to time. But they make a lot of other like questionable calls as far as moral ethics are concerned and stuff like that are far worse than Ty Conti and the bunny bleeding on Rampage. So again, you gotta have the same energy both ways. And to call out the women specifically and not all the other weird shit that AEW does, I think was more a reflection on WWE and the fact that they thought it was too much. I mean, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't go that far exactly. It was definitely a cool visual. Did the match need it? No. But I think the real takeaway here is that WWE is calling out AEW for the hardcore wrestling for the women, but not for the men. That to me is what that statement read like, and I felt that was a little unfair to the women in that match. And it was a great match, and I wouldn't have gone so far as to make it a bloodbath. But I could see where WWE's coming from, but as far as, like, again, you got to call out the Cody Rhodes Andrade shit, too. That literally happened a month before, and it was worse than anything in that women's tag team match, because it was completely unnecessary. At Reborn Again, John Ritland from the Twitter machine. Check out a show on YouTube as well at Real Honesty with John Ritland. His first question was, so about Monday's Raw, did every talking segment get subsequently worse, or was it just me? The whole formatting of the show felt off. I didn't mind the show. I thought it was one of the weaker Raws I've seen in recent memory. I've actually been not a defender of Raw, but I've enjoyed Raw more lately, probably since the draft, than I did pre-draft. I don't know if it's the new rosters or just the formatting of the show. I mean, listen, I would much rather watch Dynamite over Raw, personally. But compared to SmackDown, which isn't saying much, they have a lot more going on. Again, it's not just the star power. Like, I thought Raw's show was fine this week. Like, AJ Styles wasn't on, which was weird. And they could format some of the timing of some of the matches and segments better. And some stuff is just completely pointless. But there's a lot of the stuff that isn't pointless. And they're furthering feuds. And they have feuds I actually care about. They got Brock and Bobby going on right now. They got Owens and Priest now probably moving into a feud over the United States Championship. They're doing the Raw Tag Team title thing with Alpha Academy and RK Bro. Where will that go? The rest of the division is fine right now. Becky Lynch and Doudrop. Bianca kind of waiting in the wings. Liv Morgan still in the mix for right now. Although she's losing a lot. So, I'm not really completely hating what Raw is doing. As far as the talking segments, I didn't really get that vibe. I know you fucking hated it, John. I saw your tweets. I know you didn't like it. I actually really enjoyed the Alpha Academy graduation ceremony. I think Chad Gable is a gem. I think Otis is really thriving in his current role right now. Even Riddle, who a lot of people don't like, and I totally get it, I thought he was perfect in that segment, coming off as a goofball with the cap and gown, but he's supposed to be a goofball. I think my issue really will be when the RK Bro stuff, plays itself out and the split comes. Is he going to still be a goofball, or is he going to amp it up a little bit, assuming he's still a babyface, and become more of the serious competitor he was in NXT? That is my question. But for right now, though, I'm digging it. So I didn't really get that sense. I didn't love Raw this week as far as the talking segments and stuff like that. But I didn't think it was an all-time bad show. Like the Edge, Miz, Beth, Maurice segment wasn't bad. It served its purpose in furthering that feud. It wasn't great. It wasn't amazing. But I thought it served its purpose. Excuse me. The video package for Brock and Bobby was amazing. The vignette for Alexa Bliss, I just was not good. The whole therapy thing is dumb, but hopefully it leads somewhere. I know she said, maybe we'll let it play out, which is such a WWE bullshit excuse. But I still say I don't think they would air those segments unless the idea was to bring her back with a character change, because why else would they do it? If she's coming back the exact same, then what the fuck is the point of putting her in therapy when she just could have made a surprise return instead? But, the talking segments are very hit or miss on that show. Like, KO show was fine, I thought. And I enjoyed the Alpha Academy stuff personally. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't a highlight of the show. I think it was terrible. That's just personal opinion. So that's just me. I didn't hate Raw this week. I thought it was a bit weaker than usual. What was the main event segment? Oh, it was Rollins and Lashley in a one-on-one match, which was pretty good. Not a must-see show by any means, but I didn't come away from that show thinking this show is awful or these segments are bad. They could always be better, but I'm more of a person as to take it for what it is, and Raw is definitely more bearable now than it was 6 months ago, this time a year ago, especially when there were no fans, at least in my opinion. But that's the way that I look at it. Again, not calling it a great show, but just better than what it was. John's second question, Is it just me, or is the level of hype for the Royal Rumble just not very high? I love the Rumble personally, but something isn't clicking with the build this year. I mean, I feel like we go over this every single year. I feel like I always get a question or two about this, and I completely get it. They've just gotten lazy with the Rumble stuff. Oh, I declare myself for the Royal Rumble. I declare myself for the Royal Rumble. But why, though? Like, for example, I like Kevin Owens. But why the fuck should I care about the possibility of him winning the whole Rumble when, one, I know he's not going to win, but two, it's because there's no obvious story there. You know what I mean? I feel like if he had said, listen, I want to win the Royal Rumble so I can go on to WrestleMania, regain the WWE Universal Championship after I was screwed out of it 5 years ago, blah, blah, blah. Would I still take him seriously as a threat to win? Probably not, but it would give him more of a reason to be in the fucking thing. Do we really think that Angelo Dawkins is going to win the Royal Rumble? He's probably never been in one before. It's a cool moment for him. But honestly, though, what is the story there with Angelo Dawkins and even Montez being in the Royal Rumble? Montez should cut a promo saying, listen, I took Roman Reigns to the limit a few months ago on SmackDown. I showed him that I can hold my own. I want an opportunity at that Universal Championship. Profits are going nowhere, but I also want to focus on a singles path as well. Why don't they just say stuff like that as opposed to, oh, I'm going to be in the Royal Rumble. I declare myself the Royal Rumble. That being said, though, they've been doing that for years. This is not a new phenomenon. This is not a new problem that WWE is faced with the Rumble. We go over this every single year. The build for like the main shows, like the Rumble, for example, and I feel like I get the same question every year with WrestleMania as well. Oh, the build's not very good. The build for these Manias and Rumbles has been completely abysmal for years. Yet a lot of these shows end up going on to be very, very good. So I think we're well past the point of like the build to a pay-per-view indicating that it's going to be a great pay-per-view or a shitty pay-per-view. Because we've gotten a lot of bad builds and the pay-per-views are sometimes great. We've also gotten some decent to good builds and the pay-per-views themselves are very underwhelming. So I think we're past the point of the builds. Not really, I don't want to say they don't matter, because they do want to get people excited for the shows. But another thing is that the Rumble sells itself, and I think the card sells itself. That's another thing. I feel like they obviously should be putting more effort in, obviously. But like Roman and Rollins, the build so far hasn't been great in the week or two they've been doing it. Like the SmackDown segment from last week I thought was underwhelming, disappointing. But the match sells itself because you know it's going to be a fucking banger, I think. Bobby and Brock, the build so far has been decent, but I think the segment, or the match itself rather, first time ever, people have been looking forward to it for a long time, sells itself. The Rumbles sell themselves. Becky and Doudrop doesn't sell itself, but it's a fresh match. I think it's going to be a good match. I'm looking forward to it. So that's where I'm coming from, and I feel like that's the standpoint I've been coming from for years now as far as the Rumble is concerned in WrestleMania. Listen, as long as we don't get the annual lazy brawl where everyone throws each other over the top rope to close out like the Go Home Raw or the Go Home SmackDown, I'll be content. I feel like we've gotten one of those every fucking year. Maybe not last year or the year before, but definitely for the better part of the past decade. On the final Raw or SmackDown or both before the Rumble, they've done the tired, lazy, everyone throw each other over the top rope. Oh, that's supposed to get me excited for the Royal Rumble. You know what I mean? Because it's been done to death. But I'm not really worried about the Rumble build. I feel like the card on paper looks fantastic. And SmackDown has been terrible lately. But Raw, I think, has been decent by and large. And I think the card, again, hate to go back to it and sound like a dead horse. Like I'm beating down a dead horse and sound like a broken record here. But I think it sells itself. But that's just me. His third question was non-wrestling related. But what did you think of the new Scream? And how do you think it measures up to the previous installments? I thought it was as close to the original as they will get. I hate to say this. I saw a lot of positive reviews for the movie. You're saying you liked you're saying that you liked it, John. I did not like it. I thought it was too fucking goofy. I've seen the original. I liked the original. Maybe it's because it came out in the 90s. I don't know. The original concept and the original idea behind Scream was great. I think I saw part of 4 or part of 3 on like fucking Tubi or something last year. I remember watching one of them. Not this past Halloween season, but before the one before that in 2020. I saw like half of one of them. That wasn't very good. Scream 5, I thought it got too cute for its own good. Like when I don't want to spoil anything, but I was going to say like with the ending and, there are some twists and turns and stuff like that, but some of the acting, like from the main girl, is fucking terrible. I mean, I don't know if that was just me, but Alexis felt the same way. We brought some other people with us. They didn't really like it either. I'm sure it is better than some of the sequels. I'm sure. But if that's what that's like going off of what I said earlier about Raw. Oh, it's better than Raw recently. That doesn't make it great, though. You know what I mean? Like, Raw by recent standards has been good. Is it good in a general sense? No, I don't. Not at all. Like, Raw is still not a good show. By Raw standards, it's a good show. By general standards of a wrestling show, it's not good. I don't think Scream 5 was good. Maybe I'm definitely in the minority because I saw a lot of positive reviews and I wanted to like it. Like, I don't know if I would go see it again. I definitely wouldn't pay to see it twice, but, you know, there were some fun moments. The mystery behind Scream and that whole sort of thing holds up, but I don't know. It was just a little tidbits, and I know it's a horror movie, but just some of the aspects of it were just completely fucking ridiculous. And I know a lot of people were saying that about Halloween Kills. The thing with Halloween Kills, though, that I didn't really have a problem with, was it like a meaningful movie, or like was it completely necessary or whatever? No, it was definitely more filler than anything. But I didn't have an issue with it because I know there's a third movie coming, so I didn't have a problem with it. You know what I mean? It was obvious that it was a transition film. I knew that going in. I set my expectations accordingly. And it was what it was. And I go in for those movies for the kills. Scream, excuse me, delivers on the kills. As far as the other stuff, I mean, maybe there are more movies to come. But, like, they drop so many fucking references. Like, there's so many references to all these movies and, like, Reddit and shit. It was just not confusing, but just, like, it was cringy to me in a certain way. So I didn't really like it, personally. I went into it excited. I've never been the biggest Scream fan aside from the original. I'm more of a Halloween person. I would go see not great, quote unquote, but I would go see a Friday the 13th movie. Not a big Nightmare on Elm Street guy, personally. But I wanted to like it. I liked David Arquette. I thought he was good. I didn't have a problem with who they killed off and stuff like that, but I don't know. I just wasn't a big fan of the movie. I just thought it was too goofy. I came out of it thinking that was fucking goofy. And some of the ideas, they really tried to, like, again, they made it too complicated. Maybe because they've already tried everything else with the other installments over the last 20 years, 25 years. I just wasn't a big fan of this one personally. But again, I know I'm in the minority on that one. Kyle Rochelle from Twitter, Kyle Rochelle19, their question was, what's the difference between Becky Lynch's title runs in 2019 and 2022 compared to Roman Reigns' from 2020 through 2022? Since people hated Becky's run, they should find Roman's run boring. At least I do, because there's no one for him to face at this point. How do you feel? I honestly didn't see a lot of hate for Becky's run, so I'm not really sure what you're talking about. I don't think people look back at Becky's run as Raw Women's Champion thinking it was bad or thinking it was boring. She could have had more challengers, but that was because of the lack of depth in the Raw Women's division. That's not her fault. But she also did defend it a decent amount, and she had a lot of very good matches as Raw Women's Champion. I mean, she won the fucking thing in the main event of WrestleMania, for starters. The matches with Lacey Evans were fine. They could have been better, but they were okay. She faced Natalya, had a decent match with her. I thought the Sasha Banks feud was great. They had an awesome Hell in a Cell match. She main evented Survivor Series. She main evented TLC. She had a great match with Asuka at the Royal Rumble. She beat Shayna Baszler at WrestleMania in a decent match. So, I don't know. I think Becky, I wasn't like, oh, Becky's got to lose the Raw Women's Championship. I think she should have lost it to Shayna at WrestleMania 36, personally. But beyond that, though, I think she had a very good reign. Honestly, probably, is it the best Raw Women's Championship reign of all time? Honestly, it might be. Looking back on it now, I know it's the longest, but, you know, Ronda had a pretty good reign as well. Becky probably had the best. I mean, Charlotte's had a lot of good defenses and reigns and stuff like that, to a small extent, because I feel like her reigns never really last that long, aside from her more recent ones. But Becky's was good. So, I don't know. I've loved Roman's reign. I've loved Becky's reign. I loved Becky's reign. I'm enjoying her reign right now as well. The big thing with Roman is that it's, to me anyway, continued character work. He's had great matches. A lot of match of the year candidates with a lot of different people. In 2020, it was the feud with Jey Uso that really put that reign on the map. Those two had some great matches and segments and a great story to tell together. I thought that was a really good feud. The match with Drew at Survivor Series. The matches with Kevin Owens were great. That was a logical feud. Too much interference from Jey Uso, but it was a logical feud and had great matches. The stuff with Bryan and Edge over the course of the spring into the summer was great. The Cesaro mini feud was great. They had an awesome match. I really enjoyed the Rey Mysterio Hell in a Cell match. And through it all, through all these feuds, he's gotten one Uso to join him. He's gotten the other Uso to join him. He's had issues with Paul Heyman. Brock has come back. That's a whole other threat. Like, some matches and feuds were better than others, but it's continued constant character work. He's not with Heyman anymore. He ditched Paul Heyman. What's next? Does Paul Heyman realign with him? You know what I mean? So it's not the same thing from start to finish. It's not like he's going in there beating these people and then it's back to square one. Like, there's a bigger story being told. You could tell he has a lot of influence in the stories and his promos and stuff because it's not the same typical WWE bullshit that we've been spoon-fed for years now. It's something different. I've really enjoyed the reign, not just because of its length, but because of the matches, because of the promos, because of the stories. So, again, if people don't like it because he's beaten everyone, I get it. That's not Roman's fault. That's WWE's fault for not building up anyone credible enough to dethrone Roman Reigns. I don't think his reign is going to last much longer. I feel like he probably will lose to Brock at some point. I don't think he's losing at the Rumble to Seth Rollins, but there's a very good chance he loses at WrestleMania to Brock. Would I complain if he retained against Brock? No, because I think he should. I think he should beat Brock. Who do you have him lose it to from there? Well, that's the question. Is it Drew? Probably. Would I hate that? No, I would rather it be someone that could really benefit from it personally, but it will probably end up being Drew. I would prefer it to be Drew over Brock because Brock isn't really around. He's the WWE champion for right now. You know it's not going to last that long. I'm still not a big fan of him being champion at all right now, but at least he's doing good character work and the promos are entertaining. It's a different Brock than we've seen before. And you know he's not going to be champion for 6 months. Like, he was fucking Universal Champion for a year and a half, from 2017 to 2018. That was ridiculous. That was a huge waste of time. With Brock right now, I don't have a major issue with it if he loses it at the Rumble or at Mania or whatever. So who knows? But yeah, I'm with the camp that enjoys Roman's run, and they got to build more people up for him to face. He hasn't quite run out of opponents yet. We're getting there. He still has the Rollins feud. They still keep coming up with top-tier opponents for Roman to face. I mean, he's got the Brock feud in the long term, but in the interim, he faced Big E at Survivor Series. They had a very good match towards the end. Him and Rollins have a match coming up at the Rumble. You know, he beat Sami Zayn on SmackDown recently. Like, they're still feeding him fresh faces. It's not like we're seeing him face the same people over and over. I mean, Brock, they've done the match a time or two, and they're going to be doing it a second time. I mean, they've done that match a lot over the last 5, 6, 7 years. But as far as recently, like, they've done that match quite a bit. You know, just at least twice anyway. Other than that, though, it's not like, I mean, he beat Owens 3 times, but after he beat him 3 times, that was it. Like, they didn't feud for 6 months. And while Roman and Brock have been feuding for a while, they've had Roman face other people in the interim. Like, again, Sami Zayn, like Big E, like Seth coming up, like Finn Balor in September. You know what I mean? So he's faced a variety of people in the interim as well. So I love the reign. Becky's reign was good too. I don't really see... I don't know. I mean, if it's good character work and it's good stories, which this company is largely deprived of right now, I don't really understand why people would complain. Like, that to me is a fan issue. I feel like if people are getting bored of the Roman stuff, then I don't know what to fucking tell you, because, I mean, he is the only good thing going for the most part on SmackDown right now. He is holding that show together. Like, from just, he is the thread holding that show together right now, because that show is about to fall the fuck apart. Then I really just don't know what to tell you if you're not a fan of the Roman stuff. At Ewagu91 from Twitter, despite liking Adam Cole, despite AEW, or let's start over here. Despite liking AEW having Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly acknowledge their feud, I feel the company shouldn't have them feud again for the time being. What do you think? I mean, obviously, yeah, I wouldn't do that feud anytime soon. I don't know why you would. I know they're acknowledging it, as you said. We've talked about that before, but they should acknowledge it, and AEW is known for that type of thing, to not ignore stuff like that. Yeah, they should acknowledge the tension, but they're not going to feud anytime soon. This is clearly leading to a unified or Undisputed Era-esque stable of Cole, Fish, and O'Reilly facing the Bucks and Omega, as they should. I mean, that sounds like an amazing match on paper, if not just Cole and Omega one-on-one. And then maybe the Bucks and Red Dragon 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 or whatever. So yeah, I'm a big fan of where they're going with this. I don't think Kyle O'Reilly is going to turn on Cole and they're going to feud. I mean, they just did the fucking feud. Tony Khan's not an idiot. He clearly watches WWE, at least some of it, or is aware of what they're doing. He's not going to recycle a feud we just saw 6 months ago. 4 or 5 months ago, actually. So, I don't think we have to worry about that. Will we get a Cole and O'Reilly feud down the road? I'm sure of it. We've gotten it in Ring of Honor. We got it in NXT. I'm sure we'll get it in AEW as well. Would I do it anytime soon? Obviously not. At Iwagu91, second question. I read someone predict or want Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley to face off at Revolution. Do you feel the same way? Yeah, I'd be fine with that because they didn't have their match in the finals of the World Title #1 Contenders Tournament recently, the World Title Eliminator Tournament. They never got to have that match. I would say one of them's got to go heel. Bryan already is kind of a heel. Would he be back as a babyface? I know Moxley's back tonight on Dynamite. I don't know. I feel like Moxley should go heel at some point. He'll obviously be a babyface for the time being. I think it would make more sense, though, to have Moxley face Paige at Revolution. Now, I know Archer just came back and kicked off a feud with Paige. By no means should that be the Revolution match. I'm sorry. I like Archer a lot. The guy is a glorified stepping stone. I don't really think it's a good idea to position him as the #1 contender on pay-per-view because no one really takes him seriously as a threat to win. It's clearly a filler feud. Do it for TV. They only have 4 pay-per-views a year. Give Paige the bigger matches. I really would think it would be a mistake to do the Bryan Danielson feud on TV, but then save the Archer match for pay-per-view. I just feel like that's ass-backwards booking, so I wouldn't do that necessarily. I would do Moxley and Paige at the pay-per-view, and it makes sense. Moxley never got eliminated from the tournament. It's actually it should be the other way around. Archer, I think, coming back, going for the top title from the get-go. I'm not a big fan of that. Paige and Archer's a fresh feud. Archer's done nothing to deserve a shot. He got eliminated from the tournament. He was concussed or whatever. Maybe he can blame it on that. He probably will. He'll say, oh, I would have won if I didn't do this. I mean, it's his own fucking fault for doing the moonsault. But he did get pinned by Eddie Kingston in that match. And to say, oh, I would have advanced if it wasn't for my injury would just be breaking kayfabe, and I would wish they wouldn't do that. But Moxley legitimately never had a chance to finish out the tournament due to going into rehab. And Miro ended up in that spot instead. He went to the finals and lost to Danielson. So Moxley saying, listen, I never got my shot. I never, whatever. Maybe he beats Orange Cassidy because that was the match they were supposed to do. Maybe he beats Bryan in the next couple of weeks. Who knows? But yeah, that's the match that I would do. I would do Moxley and Paige at the pay-per-view. Danielson and Moxley is fine, but then who do you have Paige face? Archer? I just feel like Danielson and Moxley, I know they're 2 former WWE guys. That's just a bigger match. That's a bigger match to me than Paige and Archer feels like it's second or third from the top. And I just wouldn't do that, so. And that's because Archer's been built up so terribly. Again, that we have zero reason to take this guy seriously. Before he got hurt, what was he doing? He was feuding with Dan Lambert for like a month. He was losing to people. He lost to Eddie Kingston. He never really won whatever mattered most. He had like a 1-month reign as IWGP United States champion. So, I don't know. I would rather them wrap up the Paige and Archer feud relatively quickly and then do Paige and Moxley at Revolution, have Paige win, and then do Paige versus MJF at Double or Nothing. That's what I would do. His last question, do you think that Braun Breaker was the rookie of 2021? The guy only debuted in September is the problem. Overall, probably because he signed with the company at the beginning of the year. He had very little experience, debuted on TV by September. Didn't win the championship, though, until January of this year. So I guess you can go with him. I'm trying to think of anyone else who was like a rookie of last year that really broke out or whatever. Bad Bunny had a great little mini run there in WWE. He's not exactly a rookie because he's not a wrestler, but I thought he really impressed in his in-ring showing at WrestleMania 37 earlier in the year last year. Beyond that, I'm trying to think, as far as someone brand new, not someone getting called up or whatever, Priest getting called up, he had a great year on his own, never getting pinned one-on-one until this past Monday on Raw. They've really booked him very well on the main roster. But as far as completely new, fresh faces, I mean, maybe Anthony Ogogo had a chance to do that, but that feud with Cody Rhodes just fucking sucked. And the match wasn't very good either, a double or nothing. It was one of the weaker parts of that entire pay-per-view. So, yeah, I guess it would be Braun until someone else comes up with another name that I'm just not thinking of right now. It would probably be Braun, because I feel like he quickly established himself as a future star on the rise. Like a star on the rise right now. A future main event player is what I should be saying. I mean, the guy debuted, immediately won over a lot of people, and had a great rest of 2021. So despite debuting in September, he very well might be the rookie of 2021. At RJ_Marceau from Twitter, his question was, what's next for Miro? The ever-asked question. We always ask this on WrestleRant Radio. I have no fucking clue. Does anyone know what's next for Miro? I mean, honestly, all this energy that we put into, where's this guy on WWE TV? Where's that guy? I know AEW doesn't have the same amount of television time that WWE does, but where the fuck is Miro? I mean, I know they were airing those vignettes for him about, like, God, and he disappointed himself by losing at Full Gear. That was months ago, and they never really finished out those vignettes. Like, they aired a couple of them, and apparently he was hurt or is hurt, but they never really explained where he went, so it's just weird. Like, I don't think Brian Cage is hurt. I said last week, where the fuck is Brian Cage? And maybe it's because he's hurt. He's not hurt. He's working indie shows right now. They just don't have anything for him. So he might be out of the company. Miro, I thought they were doing great stuff with his TNT champion. And then he lost the championship. And, excuse me, reportedly, he may have held the championship longer had it not been for the injury. And that's why he wasn't on TV after that. But then they brought him back for Full Gear. Maybe they thought he could do it because he wasn't as hurt as they thought. I have no idea. When he does come back, though, Miro, that is, what do you have him do? I really have no idea. Maybe you can have him feud with one of these returning guys, like a Moxley. Page would be nice, but again, what the fuck has Miro done? He lost to Danielson in the finals of the World Title Eliminator Tournament, so he doesn't really deserve a title shot. He hasn't been around in months. He deserves it probably more than Archer, but you can't just put these people in there. I mean, this company's all about wins and losses. Archer's been gone for months. Why would he deserve a world title shot? That makes no fucking sense. Anyway, I don't know. You can't go the WWE route, but then also try to play up the wins and losses. They've been doing a lot better with the win-loss records in the last year, but then they'll do shit like this where someone completely jumps the line, which is a WWE thing to do, and it's fine sometimes, but you have to explain why they're getting that shot. There's no reason for Archer to be in that spot from a storyline standpoint, and people don't take him seriously anyway. It's just weird. So, there's probably a lot of people on the babyface side that are directionless right now. Like Miro, I mean, honestly, you should probably go back after the TNT title. We never got a rematch with him and Sammy. We haven't seen him and Cody Rhodes in WWE. That's a possibility. Cody is completely directionless, but, you know, that's an option. I know Punk's currently feuding with MJF. I wouldn't do Punk and Miro anyway, but I'm just trying to think of any baby faces that are free, like a Darby Allin, but they've already not feuded, but Miro already beat him for the TNT title, and it looks like Darby's about to feud with Andrade anyway for some reason. So, honestly, I don't really know what's next for Miro. I guess we'll find out in due time. I already answered that Supersonic X 1991's question. At E13A, we'll finish off with their 5 questions here. First off, thoughts on Walter's name change? Fucking terrible. I mean, I'll only say this once. I'll probably go into more detail about it tomorrow on WrestleRant Radio. It's not good. Gunther Stark, if you looked it up, a quick Google search will tell you that it has Nazi Germany-related ties. So why they wouldn't realize that when they filed for that trademark, which came out yesterday morning, I have no fucking clue. He did only call himself Gunther last night, or Gunther or whatever, last night on an NXT, and not Gunther Stark, so maybe they realized that it was dumb, or they heard the backlash between the morning and night, who knows. It just, the Nazi thing doesn't help, obviously. That's really bad. That's probably the biggest issue I had with the name. The other issue I have with it is that Gunther fucking sucks. And then people trying to tell me, well, Walter's not that good of a name either. The difference there, though, is that at least with Walter, he's been using it for years, well before WWE, and even in WWE. He's been fucking Walter for 3 years now in NXT UK. People know who Walter is. It has a lot of equity. It's not the greatest name, but the all caps thing was cool, and it just worked because they built up the name, and they built him up. It already had equity on it. It's not like they gave him a new name when he came to the company. They're only doing it now because he's on a main show in NXT and they want to trademark fucking everything, which they don't have to. That's another thing that people got to realize. Well, they got to trademark it. No, they don't. They don't have to trademark it. There's a lot of people who have come through WWE whose names they did not trademark. AJ Styles being chief among them. He owns the trademarks to AJ Styles. Would they want that trademark? Obviously, because they would love to keep the name if they ever let him go or if he ever left. Then they can say, ha ha ha, we kept your name, buddy, whatever. But he was smart enough to say, listen, I'll come in only if I get to keep my name. I'm not doing it otherwise. I know Walter's not AJ Styles, but Walter is still a big deal. He's still one of the biggest stars, figuratively and literally, in this company, I think. I think he can be a huge star. The guy is great. He's an attraction. He's like the Brock of NXT. That's what he feels like to me. Why the fuck, after 3 years and a near 2-year run as NXT UK champion, would you fuck up the name by changing it to Gunther Stark? I mean, seriously, it's not even that good of a name. You take out the Stark part. He's not Tony's brother. It's not Tony Stark's younger brother or whatever. The Walter name itself, or the Gunther name itself, just sucks. Gunther or whatever is just not a good name. They could have come up with a better name. Or why not call him, as other people have said, Walter? That's how they pronounce it anyway. So spell it with a V. Give him a last name. Call him fucking Walter White, for example. Who cares? Anything is, I don't want to say anything, but I mean, there are surely better options than Gunther Stark. The name fucking sucks, and I just don't understand the insistency to constantly change things that don't need to be changed. They don't need to trademark it. People, well, they have. No, they don't. They don't have to trademark anything. They want to, because if he ever leaves, then he can't call himself Gunther Stark. Oh, I'm sure he'll be so disappointed. It's entirely the company. It's not a fan thing. It's not people making a big deal out of nothing. The name is fucking terrible. And if he wasn't as big of a star as he is, I may not have as much of an issue with it. But the guy's a big deal. He's a big get for NXT 2.0 or wherever he ends up next. To call him Gunther Stark or whatever is fucking dumb. People are like, wasn't he Walter? Like, didn't we see Walter at Survivor Series a few years ago? Wasn't he on Raw a few years ago? Yes. Yes, he was. Apparently that was a different person, though, because this is Gunther Stark. Why even in storyline he would want to change his name, I have no fucking clue. It is the absolute dumbest thing I've seen in a while, and that's covering a lot of ground. I just don't understand that. That is really stupid. There are other ways around it than calling him Gunther. I just can't get over how dumb that name is. It's really bad. Can people make the most of it? Sure, but there are names that you just can't make work. If he was to be called Gunther Stark, that's a career killer. Braun Breaker's not a great name either, by any means. It sucks. But fucking Gunther is definitely worse. I mean, honest, Gunther is just stupid. At least you can call Braun Breaker Braun. Gunther Stark, Gunther, sorry to anyone named Gunther. I think of Paper Brigade, the old Disney movie from 1996. And it's just an awful name. It's just a really bad name. Next question, favorite non-title feud? I mean, that's a loaded question because that can cover practically anything. I don't know. I always enjoyed the Dean Ambrose-Seth Rollins feud that went back and forth from 2014, 2015, 2016. I always enjoyed their run-ins and the fact that it was very rarely actually for a championship. It wasn't in the beginning. I guess it became over a championship later on in 2015 and 2016, but early on it wasn't. Always enjoyed that. Triple H and Shawn, I feel like that was never really over a championship, especially later on and like early on in 2002 and later on in 2004. That was always a great feud. I wasn't a fan at the time as far as I wasn't watching the product, but I look back at that feud and those matches and really enjoy it. As far as in recent years, I said Ambrose and Rollins, but beyond that though, I'm not really sure. I'm sure there's a lot more I'm not thinking of, like Shawn and Taker, obviously. That was never for a championship, but their feud going into WrestleMania 25 and WrestleMania 26. One of the best stories WWE's told in the last 15 years. Just amazing. That Edge and Taker as well. That was over a championship in the end a little bit, like in 2008, but there were points where it wasn't. I guess that is more of a title feud, but I always loved the Edge and Taker feud. Shawn and Jericho too. That's probably my number one. Jericho and Shawn. That was over a championship at the end, but it wasn't for a majority of it. in 2008. That was really not the feud that got me into wrestling. I was getting into WWE and into wrestling because of William Regal, but when I started watching, that was the feud that was starting. So when I started watching, that was the feud that really, continued my wrestling fandom, and I loved it, and I thought they had a great story. So probably Shawn and Jericho from 2008. Again, their No Mercy ladder match was for the World Heavyweight Championship, but a good 9 out of 10 of that feud in 2008 were not for a championship. Thoughts on Mustafa Ali requesting his release from WWE? Can't say I'm surprised. I mean, we haven't seen the guy on TV in months. And it came out the other day, I think from Fightful, that he got in like a heated argument with Vince over something that Mustafa, whatever you want to call him, would never do. And I can believe that. Coming off the fucking Gunther Stark bullshit from NXT the other day, I can absolutely believe that WWE would have him do something or want him to do something that he would not want to do. Probably stereotypically motivated or racially motivated or whatever. Because remember, the last time we saw him on TV, he was doing that whole, oh, you boo me because of my skin color or because of my name is Mustafa, whatever. Maybe that was his idea to do that, but maybe he wanted to take it, obviously, in a different direction than whatever WWE was going to have him do. Maybe. I'm not exactly sure. I just don't like doing that. I'm not a big fan of that stuff anyway. Like, oh, you boo me because of my name. Like, I just feel like that's so, 80s. Even if that was his idea, regardless of where he would have taken it, I just feel like that's so lazy. Because, I mean, he was a fine heel in Retribution. He tried. The gimmick sucked, but he tried. He was always just a better babyface, and he was a great babyface, and when he first came to the main roster, and they just never did anything with him. I don't know. He wrestles a babyface style anyway. And he could show more of an edge. He can be a good heel. But it's like, oh, because my name is Mustafa, you must boo me. Like, that shit is just so stupid. It's like, I don't know if they had Jinder doing that when he was WWE champion, or like, oh, you're booing me because I'm not American and I'm a foreign heel, blah, blah, blah. It's just fucking dumb. If they want to do, you're booing me because I'm not American and I'm from Moscow, with Rusev or whatever, I don't have a big deal. I don't have a big issue with that. It's more so the skin color thing. It's like, oh, you boo me because I'm not the same skin color. Like that, I just feel like is dumb because I feel like, I mean, listen, there are definitely racist people still out there, but I feel like a majority of the audience, hopefully, wouldn't boo him because of his skin color. Like, we're not booing you because of your name or because of your skin color. We're booing you because you're telling us to, but not because of that. And I've never been a fan of that angle in recent years. I feel like that's just dumb. I'm not a big fan of that. So anyway, him leaving WWE, I can't say I'm surprised. I can't say I blame him. He did request, I think, a week off to be with his son, because he had, what was it called? He wanted paternity leave or whatever. So he went home for the birth of his son, and then they just never brought him back. And probably due to the Vince blow-up or whatever, that's probably why, I would have to imagine. He got to stay home and, spend more time with his kids, but that's not what people want to do. I mean, Luke Harper wanted to come back and contribute years ago when he was still under contract with the company. And they had nothing for him. He asked for his release, and they said no. That was at a point where they weren't giving people their releases. I imagine they'll probably let Ali go. He's not that big of a deal to where it's like, oh, we can't lose him. But then again, they've lost people like fucking Bray Wyatt, so I don't really think they care even about that at this point. They'll just let anyone go that they can if they want to go. I mean, aside from maybe AJ Styles or Randy Orton and people like that, unless their contract is up for people like that, they're not going to willingly let them go. But Mustafa Ali, I don't think they really see as a big deal. And in 2022, 2019, 2018, different story when people were asking for their releases and it's like, oh, I want to go. It's like, we're not letting anyone go. With Ali, it's like if they have no plans for him and they let willingly, reportedly, Toni Storm go after she asked for it, I don't see why Ali wouldn't do the same thing. So it's a shame because the guy is great, but they just clearly didn't know what to do with him. I mean, there was a period where this guy was completely healthy and they didn't have him on. I mean, he has been on TV lately. But worse than that was that he was completely off TV from late 2019 through 2020. I think he last appeared for SmackDown in December of 2019 or whatever. He was off until the summer of 2020 for literally no reason at all. They just didn't have anything for him for 7 months. And it was so fucking disappointing. And the guy is great and they completely wasted him. So I can't say I'm shocked. I'm honestly surprised it didn't happen sooner. I mean, that Retribution stuff was terrible. Was absolutely terrible. And now, so with him requesting his release, Shane Thorne got canned a couple months ago. And they also got rid of Mercedes. So who does that... Or Mia Yim's also gone too. So does that leave Dominik Dijakovic as the only remaining member of Retribution? I think it does. I think he's the only one left that hasn't asked for his release as far as we know and hasn't gotten fired yet, but I'm sure that's coming too. But yeah, that's a shame. I don't know where he would go. I'm not going to say, oh, Ali is all elite. Like, they already have a bloated roster, so I don't know. He seems like a great, genuinely good dude, does Ali. So I'm sure he would go do something else or, just help with humanitarian stuff like Sami Zayn does now that he's with, currently in WWE. Probably do more of that type of stuff. If he wants to wrestle somewhere, I can see him doing major indies, maybe going to Impact or something like that, or maybe like him in New Japan would be cool. Him in AEW would be nice, but I just don't know what role you have for him is the issue, because they already have so many... Like, they signed Jake Atlas. I mean, come on, man. I like Jake Atlas, but I feel like Ali can contribute a lot more to that roster than Jake Atlas can, or Tony Nese, at least in my opinion, but I guess that is what it is. At E13A's fourth question here. It's his 23rd birthday today, so happy birthday to Emmanuel. Hope you have a great day. His question was, how significant are birthdays to you? They are. I mean, I've discussed this before, actually. I think I did the show on my birthday last year in 2021, but they are. I enjoy my birthday. I always look forward to my birthday, Christmas. Those are probably the top two that I mean, Halloween as well, but that's not like a gift-giving celebration or whatever. I don't look forward to my birthday for gifts. I don't know. I always enjoy my birthday. That's one thing I think has never really wavered over the years. I would say, like, I had a pretty, by my standards anyway, a pretty disappointing bad birthday about 4 or 5 years ago. And I wanted to make sure that never happened again. It just was, for whatever reason, it just was not a good birthday at all. Maybe just my own fault or whatever, but I wanted to make sure that never happened again. So I've gone out and done some great stuff in the last couple of years. I went to a Ring of Honor show on my birthday. I think the year after that in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. I think I had family over a couple of years ago. 2020 and 2021, I think Alexis and I just went out and did stuff. Like, we went out to, got ice cream, went to Barnes & Noble, which sounds stupid, but I love doing that sort of stuff. Went out to go eat and just watch movies and stuff like that. So I always make it out to be a special little thing. Not a whole fucking weekend or the month or whatever. My birthday's on the 2nd of June, but I always make it out to be a fun day. I mean, I know people say, oh, once you're past 21, what's the point? But, I mean, I guess that's true. After you do reach a certain point, every other number after that is just kind of another number. I understand that. But I at least try to go out and do something cool for my birthday, at least around the time of my birthday, if not on the day itself. That's my thing. Any day, whether it be Christmas or your birthday or whatever, is whatever you make of it. Like, I learned that a while ago. I just kind of expected good things to happen on certain days, and they didn't always happen. But sometimes you got to go out and do stuff for yourself. So I always enjoy my birthday. I try to lessen the workload and do more fun stuff and stuff I wouldn't normally do on days like that. So I think my birthday coming up this year is going to be on a Thursday. So I don't know what that means exactly, but I have no plans tentatively, but maybe we could do something fun that week. Last question from Emmanuel. He said, have you heard about Vince wanting the NXT coaches to look younger? And he linked me to a tweet from someone talking about the Talk is Jericho podcast from today. I haven't listened to it yet. I listen to all the Talk is Jerichos. I haven't listened to that one yet. I went to record this and do other stuff. I'm going to listen to it later. That doesn't surprise me. I mean, Vince is Vince, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Scotty 2 Hotty has to say from his own mouth. And I'm sure he's going to be more candid with Jericho than he was with, like, Chris Van Vliet, for example, which I also heard was a good interview. And I'm sure he's more candid and more, like, open and honest with Jericho than he would be with someone he's worked with than anyone else. But yeah, so I'm curious to hear what he has to say. But if that excerpt was anything to go off of, I can't say I'm shocked. I mean, that stuff is just so stupid. He wanted the coaches to look younger, even though they're not on TV, because he wanted the more youthful feel in the Performance Center. This is what happens when Vince McMahon and the Vince McMahon effect infiltrates the Performance Center and NXT. This is the shit that happens, and that is so unfortunate, but I guess we can't say that we're shocked. It was bound to happen eventually. They're doing dumb stuff I never thought would be possible, but that's just the company mantra sometimes, as far as the creative stuff goes. It's just amazing. But, yeah, that was pretty stupid. So I look forward to hearing the rest of the interview. It's already dropped. It's already on the podcast stream and whatever podcast feeds as of earlier today. And I'll check that out as soon as I'm done here. Speaking of which, we are finished here. Thank you guys for checking out the show. I appreciate it. This was episode 425 for January 19th, 2022. Thank you guys, as always, for checking out the show. If you want to send in a question to the show, you can do so by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with the hashtag AskGSM. Find me on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Graham.gsm.Matthews. Drop a question on the post that I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not on the wall itself. And last but certainly not least, drop your question down below in the comment section on this very video. I'll include your question in next week's edition. Like I said earlier, guys, check out my exclusive interview right now with NXT champion Braun Breaker. That went up earlier. And my interview coming up next week with WWE SmackDown superstar Sheamus ahead of the Royal Rumble. Two great interviews. Last week we had the Ring of Honor champion Jonathan Gresham and Baron Black here on the channel, talking about Terminus and Ring of Honor and all that other stuff. Camille Kostick of Wipeout. Danhausen last week. I put in my interview with Tony Storm from October of 2020. Put that up on Monday here on the channel in audio form. So if you want to check that out, please do so. Now, former WWE superstar, but she was lovely to talk to. So check that out when you get a chance. Thank you guys, as always, for your support. I appreciate it. Have an awesome week, folks. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.